You're live with the full view on SABC News. Confirmation from the presidency today in a statement that the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry's interim report makes referrals for investigation against 5 high-ranking SAPS officials, including KwaZulu-Natal Hawks boss Major General Sipho Seepe. The interim report has also found evidence of wrongdoing against 9 employees of the Ekurhuleni Metro Municipality. So President Ramaphosa's office says that he's noted that some of these implicated people will go back to the Commission to respond to the allegations against them. He says the nature of the allegations, however, warrants the referrals for further investigation and potential disciplinary, prosecutorial and regulatory action right away. The report was handed to President Ramaphosa on the 17th of December. This was last year, and the contents will not be made public.
All right, let's bring you more on what the president had to say a little earlier on as far as this particular report, the interim report that is concerned. Remember that the Madlanga Commission was in fact launched in July last year. It was probing allegations of criminality, political interference, as well as corruption in the criminal justice system. And the interim report submitted in December last year to the president, already making several recommendations and also not being made public, but some of the referrals for immediate criminal investigations, as well as urgent decisions on prosecution, as well as the recommendations on the employment status and recommended suspension of individuals have also been made. And you're looking at some of the individuals there that would have been, have referrals made against them. It's Major General Sipho Seepe, as we were saying earlier on, with also Major General Richard Shibiri and Sergeant Fanny Nkosi, among other SAPS members. Also, prima facie evidence of wrongdoing was also found against some current as well as former Ekurhuleni municipality employees, including suspended EMPD Chief of Police Commissioner Julius Mkwanazi, former city manager Dr. Imogen Mashazi, as well as the city's fleet manager Mr. Chris Stein, among others. And remember that there's also going to be now a special task team that will be constituted by the acting police minister and the national commissioner, that's General Fanny Masimula, and the team will then be reporting to the national commissioner. They will be conducting these particular investigations. The president calling for swift action and accountability to ensure that public's trust in law enforcement institutions is actually restored. And remember that some of the officials have not yet had the opportunity to respond to some of the allegations that have been made against them. And it's important to note that in that particular case, regarding them, the allegations then are only prima facie and certainly not the findings of the commission. So we stay with this particular story and we speak to Professor Sipho Seepe, political analyst, to get a sense of his thoughts as far as this particular story is concerned. Prof, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time. There's a view that the fact that right now we have recommendations that have been made as far as the interim report is concerned, that is a step in the right direction. It means that we're likely to see some action. Although there's a bit of concern that these are the same institutions that have been subject of the commission. Are these the right institutions to deal with these investigations? And also, are we in the right direction?
Well, I think we are in the right direction. If you consider the very fact that you had a commission of inquiry and what it has unraveled, and the entire criminal justice system has been laid bare, and some of its weaknesses are now evident to anybody who has actually followed what happens in the other committee as well as in the commission. So from the perspective of transparency and understanding where the challenges are, at least we are clear about that. What needed to happen is swift action, and we can say here the commission has not wasted a long time in coming up with recommendations. And of course, it's in coming to the recommendation, it is also guided by the terms of reference. One is that it had to come up with prima facie evidence against certain people, and that prima facie can then be used for a number of reasons. One, where the criminal investigation is warranted, there'll be a referral, and it has actually done so. And in some cases, it had to also to look at the status of employment, where there might be a suggestion of suspension pending further investigation. And in some cases, there could be immediate prosecution based on the weight of the evidence. So South Africans have been alive and have been watching this. So in a sense, when you talk about the public trust from action, you can say that is actually positive. But the point that you are raising is really the task team. If the task team is going to be drawn from the very same group that is said to be corrupt or implicated, then the questions may be raised to whether this can be trusted. So it's upon those who've been given the task, the Minister of Police as well as the General, that given that the light has been shined on the entire system, it will be important for them to get men and women of integrity who will form the special task team, because all eyes will be on whether this task team is going to restore the public confidence in the criminal justice system.
And when you then look at the work, of course, that the Commission has done so far, and this particular interim report that it now sits with, some of the evidence that we've heard has been, in fact, not evidence, rather testimony, has in fact been, of a political nature, because it has touched on politics. What kind of conversation should we be having in that regard?
Well, the kind of conversation we should have is really about the consistency in the system. For as long as some people are treated as no-go areas, and some you find that the criminal justice system gets weaponized and it acts with a great swiftness. For instance, if you listen to the language that is being used by Madlanga, that there's been prima facie evidence that points to wrongdoing. But we also know that we also had another prima facie evidence that was presented when it came to the president of the country with Pala. And we didn't see any such haste in terms of, let's say, restore public confidence. And the way Parliament tried to say, let's restore public confidence in the president, was to say the president says there is nothing wrong in his involvement in Pala. And therefore, let's go and investigate further. And the ANC stopped that process, which led the former president to actually raise a concern that there is the ANC not believing its own president when he says, I'm innocent. Because if he was innocent, according to the likes of Mbeki, says the innocence will emerge through that investigation. But what you see here, you see double standards, you see even society that is unwilling to enter that discussion, that if there's a prima facie evidence that implicates the president, in as much as we see prima facie evidence here that implicates all these officials, why can't we have the same special task team, which is what the parliament was trying to establish, and that was stopped? Effectively, what we have is that there has been a conspiracy in the entire society. The foundations that we've known to have been very active, who claim to be custodians and champions and defenders of constitutionalism, are nowhere to be found every time there are certain people who are involved. So this is a conversation that is difficult, that we're not having.
I suppose it's also going to be quite the test, right, for the courts, because as soon as the investigations are concluded, now we're going to be seeing these matters go, in fact, if at all they do find themselves on the court roll. How much of a challenge is that also likely to be, given the fact that you do have some individuals who continue to maintain their innocence despite some of the referrals that have been made here?
Well, of course, the real test it will be in the courts, because what we have, the commission's role is not to find people guilty. The commission's role is to assist us in understanding how wrong things happen. And once we understand that, then it should assist society to come up with systems and processes that prevent that from happening. But where there is clear wrongdoing and where there's criminality, you expect the law enforcement agencies to take over. And you also expect the courts to play their role. And in the courts, it is not a case of people simply presenting their testimonies. It is also these testimonies being subjected to serious cross-examination. And this is where the process gets slowed down. And we've seen also with Pala, where the matter was put before the court and the Constitutional Court. More than a year later, the Constitutional Court has not pronounced on the matter, and which led to the EFF going to the streets, said why are other matters hurried by the Constitutional Court, but this matter of Pala, What makes it so difficult for the Constitutional Court to come up with its own findings when it is always in a hurry, when it involves all other people?
Prof, appreciate your time. Thank you so much for talking to us, political analyst there, Professor Sipho Seepe, speaking to us about these recommendations that have been made in this interim report by the Madlanga Commission. Of course, they're not going to be made public, but there have been some referrals that have been made.